grandparents to join us in this discussion, because right now, the whole world is watching. So let's pause for a minute. Let's take a moment to state what this forum is not. This is not a bashing session of policemen, because we know not all policemen are sadistic. However, there is discussion right now surrounding the defunding of police departments, which is very real. What this is not is a platform to highlight racist ideas that have allowed racism to take root in our country. We know there is racism in our country, and we also acknowledge the systemic way in which it has survived for so long. If you're not aware of this history, I'd like to recommend a book to you. Consider purchasing Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism and You, written by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi, which is right now on the #1 bestseller list of the New York Times. Okay, so get your coffee and your families together, and let's begin to settle in and have this discussion. Let's get ready to rumble. And rumble just means having a discussion that is real, having a discussion that is committed to change. So if you would like to submit questions as we are going through this discussion, you can access, we're providing for you a link, www.slido.com. Again, that's www.slido.com with the access code #33159. Okay, so I am so excited to introduce this great panel to you. And we're going to start off with Judge Zina Renee Cruse. Judge Zina Cruse is a circuit judge for the 20th Judicial Circuit Court in the state of Illinois, which includes St. Clair, Randolph, Monroe, Perry, and Washington counties. She is the first African-American woman elected to the circuit bench in Southern Illinois. Prior to becoming a circuit judge, Judge Cruse began serving as an associate judge in 2009, having previously practiced law in Illinois and Missouri for approximately 15 years. Judge Cruse currently presides over a felony docket. In addition to her full felony docket, she presides over the St. Clair County Mental Health Court and Veterans and Service Members Court, as well as she also oversees probationers in the Adult Redeploy Program. She was appointed by the Illinois Supreme Court and currently serves on the Special Advisory Committee on Justice and Mental Health Planning. Judge Zina Cruse is the lead judge for the Amnesty Clean Slate Day and the countrywide Impungement and Sealing Summit programs held in St. Clair County, Illinois. So let's give her a virtual round of applause, right?
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. So glad you're with us today, Judge Cruse. Next, we have Judge William G. Clay IV. Honorable William G. Clay IV is an Associate Circuit Judge of St. Clair County in the 20th Judicial Circuit. After graduating from high school in Belleville, Judge Clay attended college at the University of Illinois in Champaign. Upon graduation, he began school at St. Louis University's Law School in St. Louis, Missouri, where he also obtained his doctorate of jurisprudence. Judge Clay went on to work as an assistant state attorney in St. Clair County. He used his time as his assistant state's attorney to work fervently to uphold the law, protect the citizens, and provide justice for the victims of St. Clair County. Judge Clay was appointed to serve as an associate judge in 2015 and is currently the presiding judge over the juvenile court for the 20th Judicial Circuit of Illinois. In addition to his work as a judge, he is dedicated to community service, working closely with Kappa Alpha Psi Guide Right program for the youth, as well as the NAACP. However, Judge Clay's greatest accomplishments have always been his family. He and his wife are happily married with 3 children. Again, virtual applause for Judge Clay. Welcome, Judge Clay.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
We're so glad you're here with us. Next, we have Francine Nicholson. Francine Nicholson is the president of the O'Fallon NAACP. Her profession is the Chief Financial Officer of Magdala Foundation. She sits on the advisory board for the First National Bank of Waterloo, and she is the treasurer of the United Congregations of Metro East and the board member of the Catholic Charities of Southern Illinois. She is also a member of the O'Fallon Mayor's Roaches Diversity and Inclusion Committee. When she isn't working one of these impactful initiatives, she likes bicycling and hiking. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you, Elder Dorsey.
Yeah, so glad you're able to join us this morning. Next, we have Ms. Roshanda Neal. Roshanda is a licensed professional counselor in Missouri and Illinois and has worked extensively with children, adolescents, and families in counseling and education for over 20 years. Some of her specialties include women's issues, particularly relationships, codependency, single parenting, and grief. A mother of three, she says, although I'm not a Christian counselor, I am a counselor who is a Christian. Welcome, Roshanda.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're glad you could join us. So last but certainly not least, we have Minister Kim Skinner. Minister Kim Skinner is a minister at New Life in Christ Interdenominational Church. She is also part of our Women of Virtue leadership team, being the president and the leader. So we know Kim is a mother of two wonderful children, and she serves at New Life with her fantastic, fabulous husband, right? That's your man, Kim, Deacon Skinner. So we're glad you can join us this morning.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be here.
Okay, so as we get ready to prepare to have the questions, I just want to remind you again, you can access www.slido.com. That access number is hashtag 33159. Okay, we're going to start with Judge Cruse. We know the uproar that is being seen in the country today is directly related to Mr. Floyd's death, but we also know these incidents in one form or another have been occurring over many decades. Judge Cruse, what do you think we should encourage police departments to focus on as they try to establish or develop policies and procedures to prevent situations similar to what has happened to George Floyd?
Thank you. That is a very good question. I think it's very poignant for the times that we are experiencing now in our country. And it looks like it's even transcending across the world, across the globe. One of the things that my mother told me when I was growing up is when you are backed into a corner, or you feel like you're backed into a corner, you're going to come out swinging. And along with that swing is not a lot of thought, because you're filled with fear and anxiety, filled with a sense of self-preservation, you're filled with a sense of protectiveness. And I think that's what's happening now, both with the Black and the Blue, with our African-American young men when they come in contact with law enforcement, and with law enforcement when they have contact with our young men. There is a fear involved, there is a bit of anxiety, and sometimes those feelings will overwhelm the situation. I think that we as mothers, wives, sisters, and daughters feel a call to action, and that's seen by this very panel of esteemed women and men that's here this morning. I loved a meme that I saw on Facebook. It said something like, all mothers were summoned when George Floyd called out for his mother. And it reminded me of a breastfeeding mother. When a mother is nursing, if she hears any baby's cry, not just hers, any baby's cry, there is this letdown effect in her body that prepares her to feed. Mm-hmm. And likewise, I think George Floyd's cry for his mama generated a visceral reaction from mamas across the world, Black, brown, white, yellow, red. And as far as what we as a community can do, perhaps to encourage a narrative that stimulates self-awareness. In other words, dive into whether there are some implicit biases, some prejudices, some conscious or historical influences that have an impact on how officers may be reacting to these young men, as well as awareness of others. Dive into the cultures of the people in our community. Bring to the table the very people and situations that make the Black and the Blue feel as though they are backed into a corner. Make it clear that the level of integrity expected includes zero tolerance of racial and cultural disrespect and disdain. I've had discussions with police officers, and we've discussed the decrease in funding for community-oriented policing. This is an initiative from years ago, and it was designed to increase police interaction with the community. It is a collaborative strategy designed to increase the public's trust and develop one-to-one relationships with the people from the community in which they serve. With the loss of those funds and resources came the loss of, or the weakening of, the people to police partnerships. My pastor, Bishop Henry Phillips, and I have been having the same discussion over the last few weeks. And I can even envision a specific and intentional dialogue similar to what was birthed by the Mothers Against Drunk Driving, which among other things has been instrumental in promoting what is called victim impact panels. So that judges, we require defendants who have been convicted or have taken a plea or found guilty of driving under the influence, we require them to attend a panel discussion about the effects of drunk driving as a part of their sentence. Similarly, I think about how maybe mothers or women supporting the Black and the Blue might command a narrative aimed at healing the brokenness and promoting bridging the gap between the two. I believe it boils down to consistent, ongoing discussions and, more importantly, action items aimed at acknowledging the existence and residual effects of systemic racism and putting an end to it, pouring over into encounters between the Black and the Blue.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And I'm glad you brought clarity to the defunding of police departments or police initiatives, because there is an idea out there that that initiative actually is advocating to remove policemen altogether, to remove police organizations. And that's not typically what that was for. So I'm glad you brought that clarity. So with that discussion, I'd like to go on to Roshanda Neal. I'd like to ask, because what you bring up in terms of that emotional response, how not only the Black but the Blue in the heat of the moment are responding probably out of a visceral place. I'd like to ask Roshanda that what is the most prevalent emotion you see being expressed in your field as you are addressing counseling right now?
One of the biggest things that I've encountered, when the unfortunate incident with George Floyd occurred, we were already in a crisis, with COVID-19. So the mental health profession as a whole, and my practice as well, we were just inundated with people that were presenting with issues with anxiety, extreme anxiety. So in the midst of working through that, then we were bombarded with this event with Mr. Floyd. And so on top of the anxiety that especially African Americans, because as you know, COVID hit us harder than any other demographic. And so we were dealing with, many of us, loss and fear and concern with that issue. And then being presented with Mr. Floyd's incident, it increased the anxiety to a level of anger. And so we were dealing with people that are having all of these emotions that actually have been compartmentalized for a long time. Living as African Americans in this society, oftentimes we don't realize how much we are compartmentalizing as a response to the racism that we encounter on a daily basis, just to function. We had come to that level of acceptance, like this is life, just deal with it, But then now that compartment that we so neatly tucked away all of these emotions in was pretty much blown to pieces. And so now we're faced with all these raw emotions. And for those of us who are believers, there's a lot of conflict between, what we know as, to be God's word and truth and how we should respond, but also dealing with those emotions of anger and frustration and that sense of hopelessness. And so I've been working with a lot of clients dealing with how do you reconcile, the internal conflict that you may have on top of the external conflicts that are going on in our society.
Yes. So what tools would you recommend from a mental health perspective in those cases if someone's feeling hopeless?
Yeah. The main thing is important not to internalize, not to continue to suppress or avoid the thoughts and feelings that you are experiencing. So it's important to connect with someone. I know we're still pretty much in a pandemic and People are still somewhat isolated, but find a way to connect with someone, a trusted family member or friend or mentor, that you can really be genuine and express how you feel without judgment. You know, being able to just process those thoughts and feelings out loud is so important. Another thing that's very important, and we hear a lot about it, but we don't necessarily understand it, that's self-care. And looking at self-care holistically. You know, self-care is more than just going and getting your hair done or your nails done. It's so much bigger than that. You know, looking at it in different categories, such as social self-care. Again, how well are you connecting to people or in talking about the issues and the fears and the concerns that you have? It's important when we're talking about that social, the communication piece. Just because your young adult in your house or your child may not be saying much about the issue, that does not mean that they're not dealing with it. Right. So I encourage parents of, you know, teens, children, and your young adult children to talk. Encourage them to talk, even if they are not saying anything. I guarantee you they are experiencing something, some kind of reaction or response to all of this. So that social self-care, spiritual self-care, and of course, psychological and emotional self-care. And I keep saying, talk to a trusted friend or, you know, family member. But if you are experiencing distress to the level that it is preventing you from functioning in your daily life, you know, if you are having trouble sleeping or eating or having nightmares or things to that degree, then you may want to consider, you know, seeking professional help. You know, and I know in our culture, we are still just coming into the acceptance that it's okay to see a therapist. You know, that doesn't mean you're crazy. But, you know, consider that. And there are so many resources out here that are available, especially in this time, where even money is not a factor. So I would encourage that as well. And then the last thing, I love what Judge Cruse said was, you know, what are the action steps? You know, not just talking about what we're doing, but then, you know, that sense of helplessness that so many people have. How do you move from, how do you get your power back? How do you become empowered to realize that, yes, I can make a change? And what I've been telling my clients is, well, everybody may not be meant to go protest, but what are those things that you can do? You know, educate yourself, express your power and your control in that voting booth or when it's time to vote. Recognizing that voting is not just important on the national level, but it is important on the very local level that impacts your community directly. So those are some things. And then that last thing I would just say is just to continue to practice healthy coping skills. You know, get back to those things that you enjoy. If it's music, if it's journaling, you know, if it's getting with your girlfriends, do something that, you know, will restore the joy in your life.
Yeah, so I love that you brought out the conversation, and we're kind of throwing that around a lot lately, not only corporately, right, and businesses, that in this moment it's important to have the conversations, but even the conversations in the household with our children, right? So I'd like to go to Judge Clay in this moment. So we know that juvenile incarcerations, and I know this might be a throwing a statistic that you may not have access to. So juvenile incarcerations increase the likelihood of being incarcerated as an adult, at least by 40%, if not more. How do these rates compare in St. Louis, if you can, in St. Clair County, if you can speak to that?
Yes, I took this question to mean that juveniles that were found delinquent and later sent to the Department of Juvenile Justice, or basically juvenile prison. I did not take it to mean juveniles that had spent some time in the juvenile detention center only. And again, unfortunately, I was unable to get any exact figures on the adult incarcerations of the prior juvenile delinquents. However, if we were to look at the juveniles that have been placed in the juvenile detention at one point or another, I would have to say, if that's the only thing we're looking at, I would have to say that the 40% incarceration rate would probably be a little bit low for St. Clair County, or a little bit high for St. Clair County. I believe that the rate would be significantly lower. On the other hand, if we're talking about juveniles that had been sentenced to DOJJ previously, I would not be surprised if that 40% rate was consistent with St. Clair County. And that is strictly based on anecdotal observations that I have, you know, through my experience as a prosecutor and as a judge in the juvenile division. I believe that 40% or slightly higher may be accurate for St. Clair County.
So when you are addressing allegations in your court as it pertains to juveniles, what is the most prevalent, I guess, crime that you're seeing committed by our juveniles? And what advice would you give our parents in terms of that?
Well, the charges that I see consistently or deal with in the juvenile division, they deal with stealing in some form or other. So we have armed robberies, we have car thefts, we have burglaries to homes, burglaries to vehicles, retail thefts. I see a lot of weapons offenses as well, possession of firearm ammunition, and then something that is not as, I guess, harsh or significant. I see fights in public areas, fights in schools. It's significant, but it's not an armed robbery. Mm-hmm. What I would advise the parents that have children that come before me, the first thing is I am a Christian, and this is my personal belief. I believe in Jesus Christ, and I believe that that is the foundation. Teach them the Bible, teach them about God, teach them about Jesus Christ, so you can have a proper moral foundation to deal with. If there's no foundation, there's no way that these children are going to have any direction on where they need to go or why they need to go in that direction. If there is no foundation, their foundation is going to be built by somebody else. So I would first and foremost always say that is the starting point. Take them to a good church, a Bible-believing church, and then teach them to recognize right and wrong. I call it foolishness. You got to teach them how to recognize what's right, what's wrong. And you can't rely on schools, unfortunately. Schools have changed from when I went to school, when other people that I talked to, my age or older, went to school. School is still very, very, very important for learning facts, learning book knowledge, all of those good things, but not as, I guess, as good of an area or a place to learn that moral foundation. That's not really what they focus on as much. They focus, like I said, more on book smart. So it's more important for parents today to really, in their home, just focus on building up the morals, getting their children a code of conduct that they are going to apply in every situation. When I have a juvenile in front of me, they come in, and for most of them, they are very naive. They don't understand the ways of the world, and they don't have a code. They just let whatever circumstance just hits them, and sometimes they'll choose right, sometimes they choose wrong, but they don't have a code beforehand that says, no matter what, I know that I will not do this. I will not, steal from my community. I will not hurt my community. I will not, hurt, or if I'm a man, put my hands on a woman. They don't know these just simple foundations or simple code to live their life by. And I believe that's because the parents haven't been able or haven't had the time to actually teach them, the code that they need to live their life by. Mm-hmm. And another thing I would say is you need to know who your children's friends are, and you need to be willing to cut off friends that are a bad influence in your eyes. Mm-hmm. A lot of parents come to me and their children are in front of me for, I guess, heinous crimes. And they're at that time telling me that they knew that this person was a bad influence. They knew that that this person was going to lead them the wrong way, but they didn't take the steps to cut that person off. And sometimes it's basically too late at that point for you to tell me this, that you knew that was a bad influence. It is very important to just stay engaged with your children. If you feel like somebody needs to be cut off, you're the parent. You are in control. Cut that person off. Teach them, you don't have to say I'm judging them. I always say that when I'm talking to one of the juveniles, I'm not judging your friend. I'm not saying that person is a bad person. I'm saying that you and that person are a bad mix because you get together and you do all sorts of things that you shouldn't do or you wouldn't normally do if you guys weren't together. Same thing. And then the last, I would say, just discuss dreams and goals with your children and keep talking about those dreams and goals. I recently had two children. It was a young boy and a young girl, and they came in front of me, and it was so sad. The young man, I asked him, what did he want to do in the future? What was his goals? And the only thing that he could tell me is that he wanted to eventually have a mattress that he could sleep on. He actually said that. That was his dream. And I was so taken aback. I kept on saying, there's nothing else. He said, I just want to have a mattress so I could lay down. And I was, I kind of tried to pull it out of him. Well, don't you want to have a job? Don't you want to do this? Don't you want to have a career? Don't you want to? And eventually he came around to it, but he really didn't have any dreams whatsoever. And a young lady that I recently sentenced, I asked her the same thing. I said, well, what do you want to do? And she said, basically that she said she was going to go to school because I kind of pushed her to that. And I said, for what? She said, for learning. I said, to do what? And it was awkward. She had no dream on what she wanted to do. She had no idea. And eventually, the same thing. And everybody, after we were done, everybody that was in the court staff, they were like, that was so sad. I cannot believe that these children, nobody talks to them about dreams. So again, I would say that's very important. And then just to spend time with your children.
Yeah, that's all of that is so good, especially when we talk about, and it's not to say that parents who have children that end up in front of you did not try to instill those things in their children. But we know that not only are we fighting possibly the injustices in society or systemic racism, our children are dealing with that, but we're also dealing with the cultural influences that have them ending up making poor decisions. So I love that you said sometimes you have to cut off. If I offend you, cut it out. If your arm offends you, cut it off. So, and we have to, even as adults, be courageous enough, because it takes courage to do that. You will become the outsider very quickly when you do that. But that's all good stuff. So I'm going to go now to Minister Kim, because Judge Clay has kind of segued us in the spiritual kind of sense of what we need to be thinking about in this moment. So our current state has been challenging for the most faithful and grounded believer. Some have been even question their faith during this time, asking, where is God in the midst of this? Not only have people lost loved ones, lost jobs, they're in financial distress because of COVID, but also are processing our political and racial environment. So I guess the question I would have for you is, how do people not lose their faith, but stay spiritually grounded in the midst of all that's going on? What would your suggestions be?
Well, I appreciate that question. That I'm coming from the perspective of course, a Black woman, but a Black mother, and a Black mother, a Black wife. My husband is all around. My son is 25. It's not that I find myself even in a place to lose faith, but my goodness, that fear tries to creep in a little bit when all that we've heard over these years, and especially the intensity of the last 60 days and 30 days. Mm-hmm. So first I want to say to those who can relate to what I'm feeling right now, it is understandable. Even as a minister, even as an elder, even as, no matter what your standing is, it is understandable. But the thing is that regrounding is a knowing that God is the God of hope. And so that's where we have to keep our faith and our belief and our focus on him. Even in these times, we've never seen, I know most of us on this call, in our lifetime have we seen times like this, but we know that it is not a surprise. And we know that God's purpose is coming through. Not that he caused this, but his purpose will come through. So we know that. So for ourselves and for our children, it is important that even now, I like to say, one, increase the intake of his word. Let his word, the amount of time that we are spending in his presence and the amount of time that we are spending in his word, let that supersede or, overshadow the amount of time that we are spending in front of the television and all of that. So that's one area, is to increase the intake of his word, to to continue to lean on him and trust him. I like to say, fix our eyes on him and teach our children to do the same. So one, increasing the intake, fixing our eyes on him, standing on the word. His word says, trusting me, you will be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace. In this godless world, you will continue to experience difficulties, but take heart. I have conquered the world. So we know he has conquered this current situation. No matter what it is, he's conquered, and we're more than conquerors. So we can walk in that peace. So that's one thing that we have to know spiritually with our faith, is to continue to walk in faith, lean on God to give us a peace that surpasses all understanding. But there's some other things that we can do, as I said, increasing our intake, taking responsibility for what we choose to entertain ourselves with and meditate on. So again, we can all find ourselves, and I'm sure all of us have been glued to the news and glued to, everything that's going on. But we have to know that God is in control. So taking a step back and quieting the noise in our lives so that we can discover and rediscover who he is and the joy that he has placed in our lives, and that the joy that he can give us in the midst of anxiety. So focusing on that. Romans 15:3 says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. So taking responsibility and focusing on him, staying connected. Yes, we are all, most of us now are, I know we're serving, we are attending church virtually, but that is no reason to disconnect. Then this time we have to stay connected and ensure that not only are we connected, but this is a family time. So ensuring that our family is huddled around so that everyone can have that refilling of the word and the peace that the word brings in our life. Another thing is to release your fears. Release those fears to God and continue to stand on his promises. I know some of this sounds like it is, at this point, is easier said than done because of where our experiences are different. We're in a different place in this. But at the end of the day, his word says for us not to worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he's done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard our hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. So focusing on him, his peace, increasing the intake, bringing the family, keeping the family plugged into the word, plugged into our pastors in our churches. And finally, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to the word. But finally, the last scripture is that I want to share is Philippians 4:8-9. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing: fix your thoughts on what is true, what is honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about the things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you have learned and received from me, everything you heard from me and saw me doing, and then the peace of God will be with you. So at this point, acknowledge our fears. That's okay. And our securities and our anger, acknowledge it all. But then give it to God. Fix our thought on Him. Fix our thoughts on Him. Concentrate on that. Teach our children to do the same. And we have to keep, every day is a new day. Keep renewing that approach every single day. That's all we can do.
So that's great. We're about to have church in here, right? So those were great comments. And absolutely, I love how you say really to keep your mind on the positive. You know, I'm a firm believer of guarding gates, and that's across everything, social media, music, television, all of that. And some people are very much glued to the television right now. So I deal with trauma all the time, and watching George Floyd, that people don't understand how that impacts you psychologically. That's a traumatic event when you hear him, like mothers that we are, calling for his mother. So if we can reduce the amount of that and focus the positive right now, and there is. Now, we're not negating or saying that what is not going on is not historic, because we are in a historic moment, but to manage as much as we can that kind of information. So in focusing on the positive, I'm going to go to Francine now. As you know, she's the president of the NAACP. Francine, I've heard that there's several initiatives that have been going on, conducted in the community to help bridge lines of communication and create community activity. What are some of the most positive movements that you've seen, and what's going on in the community right now?
Well, first, I would like to circle back to a question you asked Judge Cruse, and that was about the policies and procedures in the police department.
Great.
So I will say that I work directly, very closely with the police chief in Fairview Heights and O'Fallon, and they both have opened up their policies and procedures to me. And part of the reason is because in 2015, the state of Illinois NAACP and the Illinois Chiefs of Police started drafting what we call the 10 shared principles. It was a couple of years in making to come to the final 10 shared principles, but both of those departments have signed on to those principles through proclamations with the city. And what I have been doing with both police officers, and I will speak specifically to the O'Fallon police chief, we have been going through the 10 shared principles and seeing how those align with the policies they have in place with their policing. So those are, and the intent was to, after we finished going through the 10, we were going to come to the public and say, this is what we've been working on. These are the policies, and this is how our department has incorporated these policies in our department. Unfortunately, COVID happened, so that is on the back burner for now, but that is something to look forward to. Okay. Also, another thing that we're working on after George Floyd's death, Police Chief Van Hook was asked me a question, what could he do differently? And I suggested that he start listening, not only to me, because I have his ear, but he needs to hear from other individuals. I suggested he start a conversation with the Black men in the community. The reason being, there is a fear and distrust of law enforcement in the Black community. And yes, we have the policies and procedures in place regarding policing, but those policies won't change people's feelings. So what's going to change those feelings will be the manner and the conversation that he has with individuals. My suggestion was he speak to the young people from teenagers to age 80. And the reason being, there was a Black Lives Matter rally several weekends ago. And the mother had her young son there. He was probably 10 to 13. but he didn't want to come to the rally because he was afraid the police were going to harm him. Our young boy should not be walking around fearing the police officers. So Chief Van Hook has agreed to listen. And I said, it's critical that he listen to these men and understand what they're feeling. I'm not sure where the conversation will go, but this is a starting point. But this is something that we're working on so that not so much the policies change, but the people in the community understand. And if there are any changes that need to be made, maybe the individuals he's talking to that can help implement those changes. That's what we're working on right now.
Well, those are all great initiatives. So we know that the systemic racism that we are experiencing, I'm saying globally or in the United States, maybe not so much in O'Fallon or where we live specifically, it's a systemic problem. And for them to disassemble that system, it's going to have to come from the politicians. It's going to have to come from the policemen. It's going to have to come from those individuals who directly impact those systems. So those are great things that are happening. And I know that we had a rally last night at the City Hall and great speakers there. And the conversation is so important, but it really is going to depend on the action afterwards. So I know that we have gone through many questions, and if there is a panel member that would like to address the topic or address something that I didn't ask you specifically, I want to just open it up for you to be able to do that.
Elder Dorsey, I had a second question that was being tossed around, which was what things Black men need to always be aware of if pulled over by police, to include body language and verbal and nonverbal communications. And that, again, is a very significant question. And it is unfortunate that the reason many feel we must ask and answer this question, particularly for people of color, is out of fear of fatal or near-death experiences which have come to light across the nation. We should be clear that in no way we condone illegal behavior. Obviously, we want policemen and policewomen to be able to do their jobs. A point of volatility, or the moment when things get out of hand, often occurs at the points of contact brought out in this question. Offensive and defensive body language and verbal and nonverbal communication. How many times have we seen videos of a person of color who may appear to be uncooperative and express anger or frustration during law enforcement interaction, and that contact quickly escalates and turns into a physical altercation and a difficult arrest? Then we compare it to videos when a white person has reacted similarly or sometimes even worse during a law enforcement encounter, and law enforcement has shown patience and restraint, sometimes even pleading with the assailant to be cooperative and to calm down, ending in a calm arrest. And as you indicated, Elder Dorsey, I'm not aware of any incidents that have come to light in our area, but we obviously see them going on across the nation. So I think these three reactions or conducts hit the nail on the head. Body language. Don't make sudden moves. Don't reach. You know, it's, I can't tell you how many times I've had officers say as they approach a vehicle, they become concerned because they see a driver or a passenger reach down. Now, you want to think that they're reaching down to pick something up, something other than something dangerous, like a gun or hiding drugs. But don't make sudden moves. Sit there, be calm, be still, so that the officer can approach and let you know why he or she has pulled you over or has somehow stopped you to ask questions. Regarding verbal communications, be respectful. Regardless of how you believe you are being spoken to. Police officers act under the authority of law, and you can't answer their questions by asking questions. I've seen videos where a police officer may ask, well, where are you coming from? And an offended person may say, well, where are you coming from? These are situations that become escalated into something that they don't have to. As a judge, I wouldn't be able to advise anyone on what to say or what questions to answer or when to lawyer up, as they say. But I would encourage everyone to know your rights and to remember and know they all have responsibilities as well. So we do have rights, but we have responsibilities when it comes to interaction with the law enforcement. Regarding nonverbal communications, be respectful once again. Follow the lawful commands. Don't let anger get the best of your demeanor. You know, I'm sure we as mothers and fathers have told our children, you know, make sure you just stay calm. Don't get into it. It'll work out once you get into the courts. Talk to your lawyer. But the bottom line is if we run into someone in authority who we feel is abusing that authority, especially if we believe it's racially motivated, it rarely, if ever, gets settled right there on the streets or in that moment when tensions are high. Reacting to fear by either side is going to breed the types of conflicts and horrible situations that we have been experiencing across our country.
That's great. Thank you for bringing that perspective. And we do have a couple of questions from Slido that are addressed to both Judge Cruse and Judge Clay. Okay, so I'm going to read them both and then allow you to address them how you see fit between the two of you. Number one, how can we as women be intentional about lifting our men regularly and asking Judge Clay in the midst of the world hating him, what helps to make you feel valued? So that's a two-part question. I'm going to go first, I guess, to Judge Clay. In the midst of the world hating you, and in reference to African-American men, what help makes you feel valued?
Wow. I guess it's goes back to the way that you view that question. I mean, I don't feel that the world hates me. I think that that's a very dark, very dangerous way to feel, very depressing way to feel. I feel that there may be, you may be looked at differently, but I mean, I've dealt with that since I was born. I mean, that's always been the way that it has been. My hope, as many people have said, is it's always in the Lord. So, I mean, I always feel uplifted no matter what I'm going through, how people look at me, or if I'm hated, I'm liked, I'm not. That's not what I'm going to focus on. As the other panelists said, you focus on the honorable things of life, the godly things of life. You focused on the Lord. You focus on His word. So being hated, if I am hated, well, okay, then I'll be hated. I'm not going to focus on it. It's not going to be my obsession. It's not going to be something that brings me down. I'm going to continue to do my job and continue to keep my head up. And like I said, focus on, the Lord and what He would have me focus on. So, I mean, yeah. I don't know if that really answers the question.
No, it does. It brings it back into perspective. And then this second question is both to Judge Cruse and Judge Clay. How are you impacted by the young African Americans who come before you?
I'll go first, Judge, if that's okay. Actually, on some level, they actually encourage me. Let's be clear, this issue of systemic racism, these issues of implicit bias, this historical oppression that has plagued our country at different times over the hundreds of years is not just present when we talk about people who are involved in the criminal justice system. It's present in the professional world. It's present whether you have a high school diploma or you have a law degree. It's present whether you're still in school or whether you've gotten out of school and you're sitting on the bench. Trust me when I say it is present and prevalent across the board. That being said, I have those moments myself when I'm just tired, when I'm fed up. I have those moments when I think, I just keep fighting and I keep fighting, and is it getting me anywhere? And then that young kid comes before my bench, and I can't tell you how many times they've said to me, it is so good to see your face. And then that encourages me and gets me another decade of continuing to fight, of continuing to go on. And I try to encourage them to, as you heard Judge Clay say, have hopes, have dreams. I ask the same questions that Judge Clay asks when these adults are before me. What's the plan when you get done? Whether I'm sending them to the Department of Corrections or whether we're being set up on probation or a special probation, what's the plan? What's the hope? What's the dream? And so on that level, they actually encourage me to stay. They encourage me to stay in the fight. They encourage me to want to continue to sit there and hopefully give them a sense of purpose or help with motivating them or empowering them to follow their hopes and to follow their dreams. Another aspect, though, it makes me sad because, of course, you see these kids and you think, God, that's like my nephew, or looks like my niece, or looks like my son. And you see that and you hear stories like Judge Clay heard, and it makes you wonder, what can I do? What can I do? And I think you said, Elder Dorsey, all of us can't protest, or I'm not sure if that was you, but one of the panelists says all of us can't protest. We all have a place. I think about a sick man who was lifted down into the house to see Jesus. Everybody had to hold their corner. We all got to hold our corner so that we can get this issue where it needs to be and do our parts.
That is so good. You guys are dropping all of these nuggets. I love that analogy, using the man that was, he couldn't get down there without the help of his friends, right? Getting back to connectivity. So as we begin to close up, there's a researcher who wrote Dare to Lead. It was Brene Brown, if you're familiar with her. And she says, the way to get information from the head, from the heart, is through the hands. So I would like to ask each one of you, if you could take a minute or less, what would your call of action be from your perspective? I know some of you have already mentioned it. As you have answered your questions, you have stated what you feel the call of action should be in this moment. But so I'm just going to leave it to each one of you. You can just speak up freely.
I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
I would say pray for your children. God is always the first and the last answer, and he does hear your prayers. I mean, I know that there are discouraging times, and sometimes you feel like you question, am I being heard? Does he hear, what I'm praying? But never stop praying for your children. That's the first answer, and that is actually an answer. It's not just something that I say.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yes, Francine.
Okay, I have two. And my first, of course, is vote. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you go to the polls. And also remember, when you're voting in local elections and you're voting for your mayor usually appoints the police chief. So make sure you pay attention to who you're electing to lead your city. Secondly, census. Make sure you're counted. An accurate census count determines how many seats we have in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it also is used to distribute federal funds. And also, I'll use numbers as an accountant. That's what I love to do. As of today, census completion in Illinois is 66.3%. In 2010, it was 70.5%. For St. Clair County, we're sitting at 64.2%. So we still have work to do.
Thank you for that. Roshanda.
Well, I already mentioned some things in the earlier question, but I guess I can add to that by saying, it's just important we are our brother's keeper, we are our sister's keeper. And in saying that, I would just add, it's important to make sure that we are well. Check on those that have been silent. Check on that sister or brother that you haven't heard from in a while. Ask questions. You know, oftentimes we're afraid to go there with people, but we can't be. We got to, you know, make sure that each other is doing well, doing okay, managing the emotions, and being able to move forward in that empowered place.
That's great. That's great. Judge Cruse?
Say, as it relates to that, is first, don't let this issue, don't let the media, don't let anyone make this issue about politics, because it's not about politics, it's about people. Certainly ideologies, left, right, conservative, liberal, they're going to play into how people feel, but this is not about politics. This is about people. This is about humanity. And in terms of using your hands, I'm all for having discussions. I'm all for having, I love the list. I've been privy to hearing the list that President Nicholson brought out with the Illinois Chiefs Association. But I need action items. We need action items. It doesn't do us any good to leave it on black and white. Doesn't do us any good to leave it in our hearts. It does us good when we act on it. Some of it's going to be trial and error, but do something. Do something.
That's great. It is about action right now. Minister Kim.
Yes, I love that with the do something. So I do have, I do have 2 points. One, I'm going with the do something. We have to vote, and in voting, we are so aware of what's happening at the national level. Oftentimes we go into that voting booth and we have no clue who the local politicians, what they stand for, what type of role can they play into the topic that we are covering today, what their stance is. We have no idea. So vote, but be informed. Be informed of what's happening at the local level as well as the national level. So that just wanted to add that piece. But then from a faith and a spiritual perspective, we hear it all the time, faith over fear. But seriously, faith over fear. God didn't give us the spirit of fear. So we don't want to operate there. But just because we are concerned doesn't mean that we're operating in fear. So so pray for the world, pray for our families, pray for our Black men, pray over our children. Continue to pray and keep our eyes fixed on him. So that would be my final words.
Those are great final words. As we come to a close, and this has just been an amazing discussion, I think, and it is about people when it comes down to it. So I'd like to share this quote with you. There will come a time when America realizes the only thing wrong with Black people is they think something is wrong with Black people. There will come a time when we'll love humanity, knowing intelligently that when we fight for humanity, we are fighting for ourselves. There will come a time, and maybe, just maybe, that time is right now. So I leave you with that thought of encouragement as we all put our hands to the plow in each of our respective places, keeping all of us in prayer and knowing that God is in control of everything. Amen. I've enjoyed this time together, and I look forward to talking to you all in the future. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend for this moment to share your thoughts about where we are as a nation concerning race in America. So have a great day, I guess. Signing off here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm not the host.